Tinge Al Andi Hangilton. So thank you all of you. I'm so happy to see you all, and I'm really happy today. So Jasḳwaan Hanu Di Kiang. My name is Jasḳwaan Kungwanat Hansen, and I also have the name Kungwanat. So when I was born, I was given the name Jasḳwaan from my Nani Katie Adkins, who had a dream about Jasḳwaan and said when I came 2 months early, I was Jasḳwaan coming back. So I've had that name before any other name. And then I was also given the English name Amanda Ann, which a lot of people know me by, Amanda. But I also often don't recognize when they call me, like, who are they got? Oh, Amanda is my name too. And it's funnily a lot of my Haida family who, when I was growing up, no one was going by their Haida name. And so my family knew me as Amanda or Mandy. And then when I went to university, so I have education both in the Western system and in the Haida system. And my background is that my mom came to Haida Gwaii in the 70s to teach, and she's not Haida. And she met my dad, who's Yaklanis Raven. And they ended up getting married, thankfully, because here I am today. And she was adopted into the Jaskszwaan Eagle clan by my great-grandfather, Chief Wia, who was the hereditary chief of Old Masset, William Matthews. And he adopted my mom before she married my dad in the way that it would have been done and has been done for many years, in that we were then part of the Jaskszwaan Eagle clan, which is what I was raised in, and that's my father's clan. So his auntie and his cousin of that clan from his paternal side were the ones who gave me my name Kungwanat in 2005, which means whale meat you bring home from the feast. And Jasḳwaan, they say, is the only one woman. And I carry these names, with acknowledging the responsibility that I hold to those names to build them up high. So when the name Kungwanat is passed on, that the things that I did to build up that name are held in high esteem. When I was given the name Jasḳwaan, and when I learn about the name Jasḳwaan, I hear this woman was very kind, and that she would go out of her way to help others. And that's the story that people tell about Jasḳwaan, who lived before. And so I hold that name with knowledge that it's my responsibility to be the same way and to keep building on it. And so I try. I don't try, I do. And it takes a lot of intention, because sometimes we're in a very unkind world. And unfortunately, that's often our language world in my journey. And I know it's not personal to me. It's because of a very violent, oppressive history of an attempt to take this away from us. So I'm living here in Outlagay, right beside Dalcothley. So I'm in Masset, and I teach here. So I teach at the high school. I just started that. I'm teaching grade 8 to 12, and I teach adult learners too. And I just got off a storytelling course. It's the first of the term, and so that was a 3-hour class. Really exciting. And I teach that through our Haida, our language office. We partner with Simon Fraser University in the Indigenous Languages program. And I had been working with Haida since it started in 2017 or 2018, January. I was the team lead there up until September 12th, 2022. And I've handed the baton to Jasʻwaan, who's now the new team lead of the Haida Language Office. And I'm really proud of the program that was built there, that I was a part of building. And we take care of the things to do with our Hudkill dialect here, which is the northern dialect of the Haida language, often called the Old Masset dialect. And that's where I come from. So I bring different tools to the work I do. Some of them learned through, institutional learning, so to speak. I have a BA in history with a minor in Indigenous studies, and I have a master's in Indigenous governance with a focus on language revitalization. And I'm in my 4th year of PhD studies, looking to build successful immersion in our community, where we don't have our first language speakers helping us because they've passed on. Or if they are here, it's very limited help because of many other factors. So that's kind of our situation. So I'm going to pull up my presentation. I did give it in Juno, but it's a nice structure. That was kind of a longer introduction. And then I could just kind of go over some things that I've observed over the years, and that I've kind of found some tools that have helped me as I try and pass along the language in a good way, as it was passed along to me from my elder teachers. And I like to acknowledge all the people who I've learned from over the years, and I continue to learn from. My students, even if they're, my youngest student. It doesn't matter kind of what age people are or what education they have. People are all part of this journey together, and sometimes it's where you least expect it, that you're handed a tool that can really help, kind of elevate us over barriers, or find a way through really difficult paths. And I've learned really, really clearly over the years that education comes in many forms. Knowledge is held in many different ways. And I really like to acknowledge that, because there's no hierarchy of education from a university and then education from community. It's essentially, it can be equal, and looking at it that way is really important, because my other education comes from the elders, the mentors who have taught me, and also people who do the work in other communities who have shared their story as well. And so that's why I'm really grateful to be here today to share my story, because in these situations is where I've picked up suggestions or ideas or examples and tried them out in my own teaching and these learning spaces that we create in our community. And some of them really work well. And it's because of listening to people who are on the same journey, even if it's a different language. Because one thing about Hudkill is we're a language isolate, meaning we don't have a language family that we're a part of. So we can't look to what's being done in other areas. But of course, we have our different dialects that we look to, and I'm going to get into that. Shigo, is it okay if I share screen?
Oh, yeah, you should be able to.
How, I'm just going to take a second here. I'll just be one minute. My daughter's just leaving. I have to say goodbye. One second.
Oh, Iowa. Yeah, it's pretty neat to hear already the similarities of the work that we're doing.
I really enjoyed her presentation at our SHI Language Institute last month. It's very impressive. So thank you for inviting her here, Shago.
Oh, why, what?
Howard Lungwad the one, and here's, oops, one moment. Oh, my stuff keeps popping up. I'm trying to get to this little piece here. There we are. So I just kind of changed the date on here. However, oops. So bear with me. It's a touchy little presentation here. So I titled this Sm'algya Hot Kishka Gusu. So every day speaking the Haida language, and the idea being, every day that we use our language, be it Sm'algya or Hudkill or whatever community where we're working so hard to bring and breathe life into our languages and spaces where they've been quieted, and so finding ways to incorporate it in daily life. If we're teachers, if we're learners, if we're parents or grandparents or aunties or uncles, or whatever role we play in our community, because each of us have a role, that we find ways to bring language into that. So I did my introduction here a little bit more intricately in the language here, where I say, Sandlane Hanudi non Aokyagan, Skilljade Hanudi non Kyagan, Anna Hyde Hunson, Kunajet Hanudi Aokyang, Kuyans Hanudi Had Kyagan. My great grandmother was Sandlane Emma Matthews, and my grandmother was Skilljade Phyllis Bedard, and my other grandmother was Anna Hyde. My mother's name is Kunajet, and my father's name was Kuyans. And Jasḳwaan Hanu Hatkilkadi Kyang, Kungwanat Hansen, Amanda Hanu Di Atade Kishkyang, Cheatskitten Studi Iskaten, Au Tlage Studi Iskaten. And my Haida names, as I mentioned, Jasḳwaan and Kungwanat. My English name, Amanda. I still acknowledge it because my dad gave me that name, Amanda. So, because some people, why do you even say your English name? Well, my dad just passed a year ago, and he was the one who came up with the name. So I like to acknowledge it's also a way that I'm called. And being from the Cheatskitten Eagle clan gives me the responsibility to that place, those people. That were my father's people, and also were my great grandmother's father's people too. And that way that our clan system worked is important for me to learn about, especially with my mother being adopted, because that it can be complex. And I've been thinking about it a lot as a community member who feels only Haida. when my mom sometimes, what about me and my history? And I'm like, I know, Mom, but this is something that I am, and I identify, and I'm identified as, and it's of great importance to me to live my life in these teachings. And I would, and I think about these things because I know the intention of my great grandfather for putting us in this clan, to connect us to my paternal sides. Now, Gistu had Kishkadi Ash Skadadaya. So who taught me the Haida language? Primrose Adams had Kishkadi Ash Skadagan. Tada Tlash Gad Ash Talang Angulgan, sorry, Lao di Koyada Gigan. So Primrose Adams, she went by her English name. She passed away in January 2020, but she was my mentor. Her mother was Florence Davidson. Many people know she was the grandmother of Robert Davidson and Reggie Davidson, and has a book during my time. What was Primrose's mother. And she took me as a student, and I learned the language with her for 10 years. And I've also learned from other elders, Chinny Stephen Brown, Nani Mary Swanson, Chinny Claude Jones, Nani Adelia Adams, Nani Gertie White, Nani Dorothy Bell, Iskan Nani Ethel Jones, the Skutgun Hansen, Uncle Lawrence Hansen, It Skrada Le Ash, and It Yakudanga. So my teachers include these other community teachers, especially Chinny Stephen, who took me as an apprentice as well, and the others who were part of Hudkill programming. I really we respect our teachers. We treat them with the same yakudang that they showed us in teaching the language and taking the time to believe that we're holding the knowledge that they pass on in such a high regard, as well as honoring them by always remembering them when we speak about what it took to learn the language. So this is Primrose and myself, 2015, or wait, 2013, so 9 years ago, part of our mentorship training. And so she was a master spruce roots weaver, and the hat I'm wearing is one that she wove, and the design on it was by Alan Weir, a Haida artist. Yeah, and so we were at the training from the First Peoples Cultural Council Mentor Apprentice Training Program. We were with that program for 3 years, and we completed the program. So it was 1,000 hours of one-on-one language learning. And here we are, fresh and bright at the very beginning. And at the end, it was like, for me anyway, for her, she's just had she had amazing ability to carry so much, as many of our elders did and do. This is another one of my teachers, Chinny Stephen Brown. He's with my younger daughter, Nora Jane, who's now almost 14. And this is in one of the programs we had in our community that I was a part of, called Haida Gwaii, which is a language nest. Sm'algya was his Haida name, which means teacher. And then he's had Haida Gwaii gu ash digetjadas or Jane Egan. He was acknowledged as the language champion, not only by our community, but by the province, and was given that title through the First Peoples Cultural Council of Language Champion. You can see his legacy is throughout our community. He taught many of the people who now are our teachers, including myself, as well as Haida Gwaii, Rhonda Bell, who teaches out of Chief Matthews School, as well as the Christian White, and his wife Candace Weir White, who were students of Chinny Stephen Brown, as well as Jolin Edenshaw, who also does a lot of work with the language through his storytelling collective Alzadaka, that was responsible for Edge of the Knife, the film that's in the Haida language. And it was because of the work that Chinny Stephen did that film came to be in our community. Because of his dedication to us, he would spend hours and hours and hours creating lessons into the night, wouldn't be paid. And he'd distribute those to all of us through cassette tapes. And he did a series of 25 cassette tapes that we all have, and of course digitized by now. But the way he would do it is he would have his lessons on one of those tape players, and then he'd have all these other tape players set up with blank tapes, and he'd press play on the one tape that he had recorded, and he'd press record on all the other tape recorders set up, and then he would manufacture the tapes for us. That's how much he was so dedicated. Our programming was obviously suffering at the time, that there wasn't an office doing that for him. but he showed us the way, that it's not about a job, it's about seeing something through, no matter what it takes. So I look to his teachings all the time, because it can be framed in ways, of course, this should be paid work, right? Because we value what the work it takes to teach the language and to create these things. But there's that other side to it, where sometimes it's just about doing what needs to be done, and the other pieces will fall into place. And that's what I learned from him. And it's hard. That's a hard journey, especially if you're responsible for a household or a family, or more than one household, as many of us are sometimes. And so what it takes to carry this load, you know, and that's going to change. The story is going to change soon. I imagine the time where people will say, remember when this work didn't even have, you know, proper funding, didn't have this and this, and look at what we are now, right? And I hope for that, for our children to talk about, or even people coming up in the next few years. So a little bit about our dialect Auhade, and I added this in because this presentation was initially in Juneau, where Kis Hadkil is spoken, which is, Kis Hadkil is spoken, which pronounces things a little differently, as well as has a little tweaks in other things. And I wanted to be aware that people who are familiar with Haida in Alaska are going to notice changes when they hear me speak. So I just wanted to speak to it, because Auhade, Old Masset language, they say, when Raven was making the languages, he was traveling by canoe up the coast, and when he reached our village, a lot of the sounds had fallen off the canoe. So it's the shortest of the dialects, as far as I can see, in most cases, in that it's said rather quickly in comparison to listening to our other dialects. So we had at one time, 20 dialects of Hadkil, as many clans. Each clan had their own dialect. We have many Raven clans and many Eagle clans. And when there was the great epidemics, that horrible, very dark time in our history where so many of us passed away, the dialects came together. And that's when we came to what we now know as the 3 dialects of our language, where we have Haida Gwaii in the south, spoken by our Skidegate relatives. We have Hadkil in Sm'algya in Old Masset, and we have Kis Hadkil in our Southeast Alaska. And so in understanding how to teach this language, I, of course, really learn about the other dialects too, because everything is connected to everything else. You can learn about it, understand it, but stay true to the teachings of our elders who taught us Hadkil from Masset. And know, oh gee, even, Nani Mary spoke some Kis Hadkil. And that's why I learned it that way. But I also learned it this way from Chinny Stephen. He spoke Auhade Hadkil. And as learners, we have to choose what dialect we're learning from, because the dialects are unique, and we can understand each other. I can understand, and I'm so grateful for the learners who come from the other communities, because I learn more about my language when I learn from them as they speak. There's explanations that's in some of the longer words that give a fuller picture of our shorter Hadkil. So I love listening to both our relatives from Agilda Tlagay from Skidegate, as well as our Kis Hade relatives from Alaska, because I can hear the similarities, and I have a greater understanding of our language. However, I honor those who taught me the Masset Haida by speaking Masset Haida. And I have been taught that each dialect is correct and that we notice the differences, but we understand each other. And through the film, the Edge of the Knife's Awe Kuna, we see that these families who spoke different dialects came together in this camp. And they spoke to each other in their own dialect. They understood what the other person said, but they answered in their own dialect. And I took that as a real learning tool. I heard from many, many elders that that's how it was always, to understand. We could always understand each other, and we speak to each other in how we talk in the same way, you know. And I really do try and stay away from analogies with the English language. But when, you know, we're in the airport and we're talking to someone from England who talks about the lift and the chips and these other words, we don't switch to say those things in our to say those things the way that they're talking in a different English dialect. We understand each other. And so I like noticing them to my learners too, pointing out and the teachings and exploring and discussing the teachings that are in looking at these things, like differences in pronunciation and what tools we could take from it. Over the years, we've done a lot of work as a Haida language community to kind of have a universal orthography, and that took many years of discussions, because one, you know, basically it's all down to the Alaskan orthography that was created in the 70s. It's essentially, that's the root of everything you see in Haida. And then there are some linguists who go on little I don't know what to call it, rogue paths where they're like, well, we understand something even further about this language and we're going to indicate it with these other symbols. And they forget to do the work at the community level and consult and discuss and see if that's how we want to show our language to the world. And you know, the biggest example of that is a linguist by the name of John Enrico, who developed a set of dictionaries about our language and kind of changed the orthography while he was doing it. So we have kind of those stories, and it's like, well, we get to make those choices as a community. We get to choose, and it's always, sometimes we have to kind of be really firm with that. Because the way that academia is set up, a lot of times people think that they have authority because it's given to them in that system, but that's not how our communities work. So it's an education piece. Yeah, and I have to work on it still with people. And it's often, it comes down to, like, I think at the end of the day, people do want to see our language strong and used, you know, and recorded properly. And it's just like, okay, well, we want that too, but we get to be in the driver's seat of how it's done. I really enjoy speaking the Haida language. Hatkishka and die hangis oslang. Die gedlung die koyada oslang. Gedlung ang hatkish ash gusugungun. So I love my children very much, and I speak Haida to them all the time. They are the reason why I learned the language. I didn't grow up with it. I grew up like many people in my age in my community. I only heard very old people speak it, and they never talked to me in it. And I only heard the occasional word of endearment like Dagwang and Gune and, you know, Hawa, Nani, the words that we as a community have kind of carried on despite the onslaught of English and all the things that English brought with it. We carried along this kind of this basic way of still keeping the language like jilts, like really important items, cow, that just don't sound the same in English. So we just kept that hodkill despite everything. But I hadn't heard anybody my age naturally communicate, look to each other and say something. I only saw that amongst very elderly people, my old nanny and my nanny. And when they left when I was 10, that was, my nanny's younger sister was also my nanny. She was so heavily impacted by the schools that she wouldn't speak it. My dad, who grew up with his grandparents, spoke it until he went to the schools. And then he wasn't able to speak it. It got caught in his throat because of the violence that he experienced. And so he and many parents chose to just speak English through their lives to protect themselves from what they experienced there. And they thought that the best way for us to kind of move through the world was just to know English and not have that experience that they had. However, knowing what's contained in the language, there's been our big movement, to bring it back in a strong way. And I thought, and same with the kids' dad, that we wanted to raise our children where it was different for them, where they saw people of all ages speaking the language, where they heard it around them as in the house, and they understood things, that for me and their dad seemed like it was part of a secret knowledge that we could maybe never get to. And that's kind of what is encapsulated, I guess, in the whole point of them removing it, this idea that it's something that is not for us when it is for us. That's what, for thousands of years, how we related to each other, to the land, to everything around us. And learning more and more and more about it, we can further understand those connections. And so I started learning 20 years ago, when I was pregnant with my oldest daughter, and I wanted her to know about the language. And we've done our best. It's interesting. The more I learned, the more I became part of the community language work. And actually, sadly, though, lots of times that meant I wasn't bringing it home because of the weight and the impact it had on my spirit, my mind, my emotional ability to I guess, basically to digest the reaction of myself and others to this process, which sometimes was very messy, painful, and hurtful. And the more I became involved, the more I faced those issues. And so I too wanted to protect my children from those types of things. But thankfully I kept with it, right? Those were hard parts of my journey. And I can look to, and I continue to look to, ways to be in this work where we can avoid those community reactions. And they come out sometimes where it's like the only thing that people can react to are the people who are doing the work. And it's not fair to anyone, right? That we need to go through that type of conflict, because it can be conflicting, where people are feeling so hurt about maybe not feeling heard, or maybe they have an idea and nobody's helping them with their idea, or maybe they have something they feel like their nanny is not being recognized like they should be, or the work that they've done isn't being acknowledged and they want it to be. And so there's great feelings of injustice that sometimes are attached to when people kind of step into this world of language work. And it's like, maybe it's the people who's running the language office, maybe they're responsible for this injustice. which isn't right, but it's somehow that sometimes becomes what happens. And I've been part of that, where and I don't have thick skin, and I don't develop, I don't interact with conflict very well. I'm trying, and so I've had a very hard time sometimes on this journey. And so I always come back to why am I on this path that can sometimes bring me to such difficult places where I'm vulnerable to attack or to really, really hurtful actions by others who are just themselves processing something that's so difficult too. And I remember, oh, di gitalang, di koyada oslang. I love my children very much. And gitalang hat keskati ash gusu gungung. I speak my language to them all the time. And I'm thankful for everything that I've learned, because gin andang unsitslu dang at ash skadadas. So when we do know something, we want to teach it to others. Because I really felt many times in this journey that same way I felt growing up as a kid, that language was a secret basket of knowledge that only some people could open. And I remember to close my eyes and imagine walking into my community and hearing Haida language spoken all around me, at the co-op, in the school, in the hallways of whatever building, that we have on the streets, people greeting each other and asking each other questions and answering in our language. And that's how it was here for thousands of years. So the only way that we can get that back is knowing that everybody has access to that basket. And that means, showing respect. Showing respect for people. That means, of course, sometimes, people are going through a very hard time when it comes to language, and it's also in other parts of our lives, but sometimes language can be almost like a central, it's who we are. It's who we are. And so being respectful to whatever level of learner, coming into the spaces, meeting them where they're at, listening to others, and remembering that we're all in this together is really, really important pieces. Just asking ourselves, like for generally, like gustudang gulagun. When we're looking to learn or teach or discuss or have community spaces, speaking about things that we ourselves are in. So is it something, are we passionate about cooking? Like, are we all the time cooking for our families? Well, I really recommend focusing on learning about that activity. Do we love berry picking? Do we love preparing, salmon for the winter for our loved ones? Focusing lessons and community learning spaces and curriculum and time that we're learning the language on these things that we love to do is really important, because that way it's going to just attach to our soul, right? It's like, because sometimes some lessons that we come across, they're just so disconnected from things that we might be doing in actuality, like or talking about in real life. And it, they all have purpose, right? These people who create lessons aren't thinking that, they're not going to relate to our lives. They're thinking that they're lessons to teach us part of the language. So I really find it so helpful, though, to switch and focus on love, koyada, things that we love doing, things that we love saying, and then starting there. And it feels good to do that. And I enjoy it, and I recognize that joy in students as well. use tools to help you stay in the language around your home. Like I use the example of baking because I really enjoy baking for my family. So just in kind of like trying to shift my mind out of all this kind of thinking work I do in the language and too much writing and too much in front of the screen, including it more in my actions around the house. And so having like some cues in my recipe books. So I'm thinking in the language when I'm baking for my family. Other people love gardening, for example. And so, you know, having the tools labeled in Hodkill, thinking about the action in Hodkill and how you would say it. Those are all really great ways to include language learning in really enjoyable parts of your life. I just gave this example. This was something I did with my mentor when I was trying to learn about baking in the language, and we didn't use any English when we were going through our activities. So I didn't want to say, how do I say pouring water into a bowl? Because I found with mentor apprentice, you know, we really didn't want to frame things in an English way of thinking. So because my elder was in her late 80s and wasn't into just us doing things, early 90s, like it was really great to have visual cues. So I had a friend draw out this wordless narrative, and then I asked her to explain each photo. So rather than say, can you say this and this and this and this, she told me what she saw. And then it removed English from being a tool to help it, like, so it wasn't this and this and this in English, this in Hodkill. It was looking to this, saying it in Hodkill. And it was really helpful for me. And we were able to repeat it over and over again, and sometimes make it more complex too. The more I learned, it's like, oh, maybe I can also say a little bit more about this. Say I'm going to do it tomorrow morning. How would I say that? And then we went through the whole sequence in the future tense, and we can do the whole sequence in the past tense. And so it's just expanding on tools where we kind of remove that English as a barrier, and it's focused on something that you really love to do. So Sm'algya, use your language, and this could be for Sm'algya or as well. You know, what do you want to say in your language? What do you want to say in your language? And just focus on those areas, chunking it up. And I wanted to talk about baking while I bake, so I focused on that area, and I was able to say what it was I was doing. And then I was able to use that every time that I baked, right? So every time you're doing something, so that's why you really want to focus your areas on things you do. So every time you do it, you can think about the language and build it in. Maybe one day it's just single words for what you're doing. You're naming something about what you're doing. And then the next day you add to it, or the next time you work on it, you add to it. You're able to say a sentence. You know, I am doing this right now. And then you keep that in mind. And sometimes cues are really helpful, like around the house, like just with labeling things around the kitchen, for example, or in your office, if that's where you are all the time. So you look at it, oh, gee, this skitlangu, you know, kugin. And I'm always looking at my coffee cup in my books. So, oh, okay, that's in my mind. And then, yeah, using those cues with Post-its or signs, and kind of maybe trying to keep English out of it and just using pictures. And I know this is coming to the end. I'm keeping you all here long. I'm at the end of your time together, but these are just some cues I use in learning with my students. to keep repeating things. Hausant Sudi, say it again over and over again. In many ways as we can. Just starting in manageable chunks, starting with 1 word, 5 words, then 10 words, then a sentence, then 3 sentences, then 5 sentences, and just building from where you've started, and knowing it's much easier to do that, to set goals and steps to get there, than to say, oh, I'm going to learn 5 sentences. Okay, well, first I'm going to learn the words, then I'm going to learn the 1 sentence, and then I'm going to build myself up to that. Listening is really important for us as a community here. We can no longer sit with our elders to hear them fluently and fluidly, more importantly, I try and stay away from fluent, fluidly just speak. And we hear the intonation, and we hear how it goes up and down, and the pronunciation. Because they're not with us, we have our recordings, and listening to them is just a really key part of our learning. Just having it kind of in the background sometimes, to have that surrounding us, because we can't have it in the ways that we once could. And so we have, those tapes, like I was mentioning, from Chinny Stephen Brown. We have videos. Thankfully, there's been video projects over the years recording elders tell stories, and other types of recordings that we circulate and try and make available to everyone. And having respect for your language, it's usually not us who need to work on this. It's our educating others who are not from our community. Often we say yatsade, white people, and not personal to anybody. I really make sure to say this. It's not personal to anybody. It's a systematic issue where people were taught something about our language which isn't true. That it's kind of like a shallow bowl that they can just pluck things out of interest, and not understand that it's actually a very deep well that contains very complex, sophisticated knowledge that can take years and years and years of very intense study to master. And that type of understanding is just, we have that. It's kind of, we were born into that understanding. But I'm finding, and I'm talking about it now, just being in the school system, people not understanding that, and that really showing a lack of yakudang, a lack of respect for the language. People in certain roles who didn't grow up in the community or aren't Haida but are in the school system. I see it, and it's really concerning to me. This idea that our language can be taken as an elective, that it's not a core skill for our students here on Haida Gwaii to have, and that our students aren't being told or communicated by everyone else in the system, their parents at home, their other teachers, the administrators, that being in a Haida language class is a way to better themselves, or to increase their knowledge, or to become, educated. Somehow there's a that's not being communicated to our children, and I see it in the role I'm in right now. And so that piece is just really important, because that's the way we'll set ourselves up to know what kind of work we need to do, and how we can do it. And so it's a lot of educating we often have to take on of others. And then when we are doing our work, we're always making sure to check with elders with us here, as I keep mentioning about our first language speakers. Not with us, there are a lot of first language understanders. So people that were called for so many years silent speakers, I think they're called heritage speakers now. People who know the language but can't speak it because of they were taught to the language their whole life, but they weren't expected to respond. They were speaking back in English, and that's a language they were allowed to speak at home and at school. And so them relearning the language to speak is the same as us as learners who didn't get surrounded by it, but they are able to understand every single thing that they hear. And so those people are so valuable because we can check with them our knowledge, our trying out as learners. Because myself, I'm still a learner, and many other people in my role still have mountains to go over. Keep working on climbing, and to be kind to ourselves and to each other. Antladi. When we tell children to be kind, it's actually that the respond is to be kind to yourself, because essentially that's how we're kind to the world, right? Is that we're treating ourselves a certain way, and then we could treat others that way too. As I'm 44 years old, and that's a really hard lesson. It's really easy to be hard on ourselves. Everything in the world is telling us to be really hard on ourselves, and then that's really hard in our language learning practice, because there's so many opportunities to be hard on each other, and it's like every path is almost taking us in that direction. So we have to really fight hard to remember kindness. We're all in this together. We all want to reach that same goal of talking to each other in our language in a good way. That's why we're here. That's why we're here. And sometimes all of, when they say see the forest through the trees, sometimes those trees get in the way of many of us, myself included. I've gotten into where I can't let something go. I'm so hurt by something. And yet it's not personal to me. It's not personal to me. We're all in this together. Mistakes are natural. Mistakes are natural in our language learning process, and that's so hard for our communities. We have high standards. When we look at all of our artwork in each of our communities, our standards of expression are very high, recognized around the world for the beauty, for example, of our carvings, of our artwork. And when we teach, when we have young people who are learning, who are apprenticing, we have very strict ways of them knowing if they've gotten it right or not, because at the end result, it's those standards need to be met. So we have this issue then where learning a language as a second language learner means we're going to make a lot of mistakes when we try. It's natural until we have a community filled with, again, first language speakers who are surrounded by the language naturally. That's how you can learn. You learn two ways: surrounded by the language as a young baby all the way through your formative years. That's one way of learning. That's not a way we have accessible in our communities. So we have this other way as adult second language learners. And that means that's part of it. It's essential to it to stand up and say something wrong. That's a part of second language learning. It's unavoidable, because it's nearly impossible unless you are a language savant. And there are probably 0.000000001% of the population who's a language savant, who can hear something and mimic it back perfectly, understanding what that content is. Then we have to be in this boat together, where then we have to say, okay, we know this language deserves respect. We know that we have this high standard of communication in our communities. But right now we have to just shift that in allowing for this process where adult second language learners, or even children who are older in their years, who are learning it as a second language, are going to try, and they're going to need to be corrected in a really good way. Because we see over and over and over again, harsh corrections means that learners shut their mouths and won't try again. And that means we won't have success as language learners. And so that process is just something we have to just keep in mind with our antladi, our kindness to ourselves and to each other, and to this process. And we will one day come to this spot where it'll be really rare to hear misspeakings in the language. But right now we just have to find a way to kind of accommodate that, because that's the only way a second language is learned. Yeah, and I think this was just an example of me doing the calendar every morning with Primrose, and we talk about the weather first. And I sure did have a long presentation for you. Oh, here we are. This is our, the most ideal, and every time I can get out there, it's perfect. Doing things on the land and in the ocean, berry picking, root gathering, fishing, or fish processing, like all the activities we do are really great language teachers. And it's just, I have to say, everything in our world makes it way easier to be in front of a screen, right? The world that we're in now. And so like just making that big effort to make these learnings happen outside is really valuable, and it's worth it. And so using our language, relating to our cultural practices, it strengthens not only our own learning journey, but our community language journey. It promotes healing and well-being. So when we're doing the language as we process fish, or as we pick berries, or as we do some of our protocols that remain with us and we teach them to our children, then it just, that the function of the language comes through so strongly. And the learning is that much more impactful. And I did a series of videos on YouTube that include these sayings about gathering. If you look up Jasḳwaan Bedard on YouTube, I have it all there, with a partnership with the school district and SHIP. So it's in 2 dialects, Haida Kill and Hod Kill. And the artist Deja Bush, she's a Haida artist. She illustrated all these activities, and they're promoting kind of doing our gathering. It says the word of the animal first, the sea animal or sea creature, and then the action in the present tense. And there's one of a couple of resources I've been able to create with partnerships with others. And the next one is a Respecting the Land book. This one's called Ocean Food, and the other one's all about gathering on the land. And and this is another example. Alung Holung. So another piece is we've only just in the last 2 years incorporated tonal markers in our Hutkill in the north. You'll see it's not in this resource, but it's in any resource after it, which, because we don't have our elders to mimic after anymore, and our language is actually a tonal language where one word can mean 2 different things if it's a high tone or a low tone. And for some reason, we were taught for many years we didn't need to indicate it, because it was predictable, but nobody knew how to predict it. So we've kind of corrected that, and we now indicate where we put high tone in our language. And I'm not sure if that's needed for Sm'algya. And these are just a couple of the examples. Along Newt Agungung, the harvest octopus. And this Ak'au Halung, I gather barnacles. And that was the last one. And the Lung Osh Kiltlugging, however, for listening to me today and inviting me. And I'd love to take any comments or questions. And the Lung Osh Kiltlugging, I appreciate all of you. Hoa.
I had the honor of sitting next to Jasḳwaan last month at the Language Pathways gathering in Juneau. and she taught me a lot about my Haida side, and I'm forever grateful for connecting with her. And I've made it my goal to go to Masset next year, so I'm really grateful for that invitation as well. So Dykston for sharing today. Lum Godot no needs, and it's really good to see you.
Thanks, Kingeas Andi Hangilton. I had so much fun. I hope there's more language institutes. That's all I can say. Put it out there. And I'm gonna get to my octopus bag. You keep inspiring me with your updates. It was such a lovely experience.
Oh, Godam Deben.
Haida Gwaii. We met at the Language Institute too, so I thought it was really precious. And just hearing you speak, I thought it was just so beautiful. And then I found some videos on YouTube, so it's really inspired me to continue to learn my Haida side as well. My mother's mom was Sarah Peel, and then my dad's mom was Charlotte Kristovich, and she just passed away last year. So to really honor both of my nanas, I really want to start learning as much Hadkil as I can. I always ask myself if I was put in a position, how would I be able to pass it on to my nieces and my nephews? So I've been taking Duck Juice's lunchtime classes. I think I'm on my second year, and I've been working with Sm'algya for a few years now. So for me, when we learn our unique sounds in Hadkil, I was, oh, that's the same as Sm'algya. So it's hard to relate it to Sm'algya. But yeah, I think it's really precious, all the work that you're doing in Hadkil. I just wanted to say one more thing. So it was like a few years ago, I started having dreams that I traveled to Haida Gwaii to learn, and I was speaking with, I can't remember his Haida name right now, Ben Young. So he was speaking Hadkil, and I was speaking Sm'algya, and we rode in a little plane, and his wife was driving. This was even before I knew that she was a pilot. So yeah, I'm excited for all my dreams to come true. So Haida Gwaii.
Oh, at a local Toix at noon. Oh, sorry, I'll let you respond.
Oh, I just wanted to say how for that I got chills, and I know that one day you'll be here with that coming true. I can feel it. So I look forward to that. You're welcome to my home, and we'll have how together.
Oh, local Toix at noon at a Jasৰীষ্টwa. I really appreciate you taking the time to come and share with us. It's very inspiring to us. I just wanted to make a couple of observations. First of all, Hawa for sharing about your teachers at the beginning to tell us who they are and what they did for your work. That's a thing that we try to always hold up to. And so that was good to see. When you first started, you were talking about names and the importance of keeping your name good. One of the parting greetings we use with each other is Amswan, make your name good, or do your best. So that's very much a part of our teachings as well. Tones and emphases in our language, and we have some issues about the way we write our language too. And there are a couple of main ways that it happens now. And I wanted to share a similarity in one of our writing systems, if part of it is underlined, that's where you place the emphasis of a word. And that really contributes to the flow and the cadence of our language. We don't have high tones, but we do have markings to indicate the emphases or the way a vowel sound changes. And like you mentioned, sometimes too, if you use the wrong tone, it can change the word altogether, and you're saying something you kind of wish you didn't. But I just want to make those comparisons, and yeah, thank you very much. And Isabel.
Hawa Dunan Killoggin Jasḳwaan. I have a question. If you were to give a new language learner one piece of advice for not giving up and staying strong with the path, what would it be?
It would be that your ancestors are with you every step of the way. And I have to always remember this myself, and I close my eyes and just think about images of my grandmother, my great-grandmother, my great-grandfather. They're my heroes. And even if it's someone like an auntie or someone who you really connect with, to think of them and how proud they are of you. And I know that that's what keeps me strong, and I need to remind myself of that a lot. However, for that question, A.
Anybody have anything else?
I'm going to try to say this. Jahawa Haida Gwaii in Deutschen Dash. Thank you, dear woman, for your words. I enjoyed seeing you with the language pathways, and we're going to go into a new grant era, so hopefully we'll have more language learners at Sea Alaska Heritage. Really liked your words, especially being gentle with each other. There's not that many of us, and it always hurts me, I just gets to my heart, just we've got to lift each other up and hold each other up and be gentle. So I really appreciated that message. Hawa Deutschen.
Hawa Gwaii, it was really lovely to meet you at the Institute, and I hope, I feel like already, I feel like really good things are going to come from joining together. They always do. And this morning is a really great example of that. And so Hawa, and I appreciate the words.
Jessie?
Jasḳwaan, thank you so much for your presentation. It was really beautiful. I was thinking a lot about just how emotional you talk about the language journey being, and I know that's something I've definitely felt, and this group has been so supportive and kind of allowing us to process our emotions around language learning, which has been so important. Like you said, we can't feel like we're alone, like kind of learning in community is so important. And so I'm always so grateful for everyone I get to share space with and hear and learn Sm'algya with. It always makes my heart really happy. I was just thinking about too how you were talking about making your name good. So I learned Jasḳwaan, which means make your name good, from this group and from David Boxley, and that idea of the responsibility to make your name good. And you were talking about how your name, right? You had to learn how to be really kind and embody that with your name. So I don't know, it kind of gave another layer of meaning to that phrase in our language, the Jasḥwaan, make your name good, because we have that same concept in Sm'algya. So I thought that was really cool. I always have so much trouble with my name because it's Jasխwaan, which means mother of all mothers. And my Grandpa Jeffrey gave that name to me, and it feels just like such a big responsibility. And I still, I don't know, it's hard to kind of live up to those standards. Like you were saying too, our standards are so high for each other, and so also being kind of gentle and kind with ourselves along that journey while we're still reaching for really, really high standards. So anyway, there's just so many beautiful things that I connected with that you said. So thank you so much for sharing, and thank you, Shagop, and everyone who organized. It was really beautiful. Thank you.
Oh, I'm really going to take that saying, find out how to say it in Hotkil. I know I think it was in a message that someone signed off saying that to me in Sm'algya, and I was just really impacted and feel it's such a great message. And know too, when ancestors picked our grandmothers and grandfathers, and when they gave names too, you know, it's such a gift, and almost like where we needed it most, it can be carried through with that. And they saw within us, you know, not only a responsibility that we had to hold up that name, but a responsibility that the community and that everyone has to help us hold up that name. So it's carried not only by yourself, so to remember that too, as part of being the gentle piece. So Hawa, for sharing.
Why? I'd like to just tell you a little mouse. You were talking about all the dialects and the different ways that people had to speak. And in Sm'algya, we have, there are three main dialects from the roots of our language, Nisga'a and Jasխwaan, and I guess they call it coastal Sm'algya, which is what we use. And when I was a young man, a boy, I went to BC with my Oosh, my great grandmother at Anoyu, my mom. We used my grandpa's old beat up Ford pickup truck, and we loaded it up with Sa'ask, seaweed, that we processed all summer long, and we traded straight across for kautsi, hooligan grease, from people up the Skeena and Nass rivers. And my Oosh was a first language fluent speaker, and she would sit down with speakers all over the place from different dialects, and they would speak to each other, and they understood each other and responded in their own dialects the way you were talking about. And there was no fuss about that's not how you say it or anything like that. And I feel very fortunate, Ayaltkanu, to have witnessed that. I had no idea as a young boy what I was seeing. And I'm fortunate to have that experience. So just wanted to share that. We have similar things to work through and understand and approach with, we call it shlomsk, respect and honor.
However, for sharing that, and I love that, because can imagine that happening, right? You can imagine that happening again, and then another young boy listening, or young children listening, and I always think about that, imagining situations that I hold me close to my language, like being on the floor of my great grandmother's house and hearing her speak to her daughter, my grandmother, in the language, and that keeps coming back to me, and I want my great granddaughter to hear that too. I love being here. I love this conversation, and I think it will continue. And I'm so proud of you all for joining together to learn and speak your language and spending that time and energy You're really showing respect to yourself, to your ancestors, to those that come after you as well. So I want to just hold you all up high for what you're doing, and thank you. Thank each of you.
Jasḳwaan, dank ings eesti goede lag and jahawa.
Again, Shugop and Langwadlo, each of you. And I will sign off now. I loved being a part of today and also being a part of lifting up these victories for your group. It also lifts me up. So how
King Sung.
and King Sung.